In today's video, I want to level with you guys on just some of the sketchy stuff that I see going on that I hope you're not a part of. Let's dive right in. Ryan Dossey here, and I want to walk you through a couple of my rules when it comes to doing business, especially in the real estate space. So the first one is, am I treating somebody how I'd like to be treated? Is this person kind of better off having met me or not, right? For instance, if you're a wholesaler, you go under contract with somebody, you lie, tell them you're a cash buyer, you can't find a buyer and pull, are they better off having met you? I would argue no. The second rule that I use is the grocery store model. Now, I got this from one of my early mentors, Jerry Puckett, which is effectively if I'm walking through a supermarket and I see a seller that I did a deal with, can I walk up to them, shake their hand, ask them how the kids are, or do I need to kind of like pretend I didn't see them and dip out real quickly, right? Are you doing things correctly or not? The third one that I've kind of started to recommend lately is like the grandma model. I feel like people like to pretend, oh, I'm leaving people better off. Oh, of course, this is mutually beneficial when it heavily benefits them. But if somebody did what you're thinking about doing to your grandmother, would you be happy with them or not? Let me give you a couple examples on kind of some of the sketchy stuff that I won't touch with a 10-foot pole. The first one has been around for quite a while, and that is lease options. Now, there's a correct way to use the tools I'm going to talk about, and there's an incorrect way. The correct way to use a lease option would be you have somebody that wants to buy a house from you, and for whatever reason, they can't qualify for a loan right then and there, but they'll be able to in a short amount of time, right? Maybe they're paying off debt, maybe they're working on their credit, something of that nature. So you could sell somebody a home with a lease option and then work with them to execute that option to buy the house. If you're not familiar with a lease option, it's basically two separate agreements. The first is the lease. Hey, what are they paying a month? The second is the option. So they're paying a non-refundable fee to be able to buy that house at a later date. Here's where it gets sketchy, when it becomes like a down payment farm. So I go and lease option a place to somebody that will never be bankable. No way, not a snowball's chance in hell they're bankable within the 2-year or 1-year term I set, with the whole goal being I take their money, I kick them out, I move somebody else in new. I take their money, I kick them out, I move somebody else in new. Super sketchy, and it's one of those business models that I feel like is just kind of ripe for abuse. We just had a seller reach out to us on a portfolio they're looking to get rid of these, and while we were in talks with him, he got arrested for fraud and how he was treating people. The second one I want to address, and this is all the rage right now, is novations. What's a novation? A novation effectively allows you to kind of take control of somebody's property, put it on the market, and get paid for it without having to buy it. Won't get too technical into like the legal instruments and stuff. To be blunt, we really haven't done them, but here's my issue with it. The right way to do it, in my opinion, is you have somebody who has a home that they want to sell that needs repairs. It doesn't make sense for you to be able to buy the house with the cost of private money and all that, but you could say, bring the repair budget, remodel the house, throw it on the market. That's mutually beneficial, right? Especially if they're getting more than they'd be able to get on the market as it sits. Where I have an issue with it, and what I constantly see online, is people using novations where they're not really doing any repairs. They're literally just taking somebody's house, doing nothing to it, turning around and throwing it on the market. Oftentimes, there's kind of some like sneaky verbiage in the contracts where it's not super clear what's going on. In one of my markets, there's a guy that does a ton of these, and they have a lot of really, really bad reviews from sellers that are like, literally all they did was take my house and throw it on the MLS. Like, what did I need them for? Here's the problem with it, is often it's set up that they agree to a number, and anything above and beyond that, the investor keeps. My opinion, if you're doing remodel and you're then making an upside, that makes sense. Where it starts to feel more like you're just stealing their equity is if you don't do anything and just keep all the spread above and beyond that, especially if you haven't been honest with them about what their house is worth or what it could go for on the MLS as it sits. Why do they need you if you're just throwing it on the MLS and not doing any work? It almost feels like our moral compass in real estate has gotten warped to the point of, well, if we made money on it, then it was good. No, like you can do horrible things and make money on it, but that doesn't make it okay or right. Whether or not it was profitable should not be the litmus test on if that's how we do business or not. The third one that I have issues with is teaching newbie investors how to subject to homes. If you're not familiar with like the subject to, terminology, it's effectively buying a property, taking over the existing financing. Now, in theory, right, could be a really good thing. Somebody's fallen behind on their mortgage payments. The house isn't selling. They can't afford it. If their choice is, say, foreclosure or somebody else taking over their payments, maybe that makes sense. We've actually done a few subject to deals where we took over somebody's loan, remodeled the house, got them out of it, got them paid, and then sold it for a profit as a flip. I don't really have an issue with it as a short-term strategy. I don't even really have an issue with it long-term. Where I have an issue with it is where it's being taught to people that don't have capital and they don't have any experience. So if my grandma goes and somebody says, hey, I can't buy your house. Well, I can, but I just have to take over your mortgage. Here you go. Well, if that person doesn't have any money, what happens if they can't find a buyer for it? Right? No, I'm sure it's just a good old wash the hands of it. And no, she's not my grandmother, right? Or what happens if they sell that property then to somebody else and they're like cash flowing in the middle? What if the first guy or the second guy they've sold it to trashes that house? Are they going to go fix up Nana's house? How are they going to do that with no money? Now, in theory, if somebody's behind on their payments or something, they really need out and it's not selling it subject to could in theory be better than a foreclosure, right? I think a foreclosure stays on the record for like 7 years. But from a partnership angle, let's call it that, the average marriage in the US lasts right at like 8 years. You really think that seller is going to be happy with that decision year 23, 24, 25? Statistically, it's not likely. Early on in my career, I was super interested in like creative financing, seller financing, subject to, mortgages, lease options, wraps, all of this stuff, because I wanted to own the property, but I didn't yet have the capital for it. And while I'm not knocking those strategies, we use several of them still to this day. There's a right way and a wrong way to do them. And in my opinion, when I was first starting out, I'm super thankful that I didn't land anything on owner financing or creative financing, because if stuff hit the fan, I wouldn't have had the capital to make it right. I forget who it was that this came from, but I try to operate my business in a way that's blameless. As in, if I'm on the 5 o'clock news having to explain what I did, can I stand behind it, right? If I'm in a court of law and somebody's reading my text messages, my notes in my CRM, am I proud of those? There was a time in our business with some of our employees that like some of the notes, some of the phrases wasn't stuff we were okay with. So we had to go ahead and clean that up. Similarly, you might have used or be using some of these strategies, and maybe you did a lease option and had to move the person out and find somebody new. I'm not here to shame you. I'm simply here to tell you that I think you're capable of doing only good business that benefits good people. Remember, is it how you'd want somebody to treat your own grandma? Could you run into that person later in the grocery store and be okay with it? Lastly, is it how you'd want to be treated? Thank you for taking the time to watch today's video. Hopefully you found it helpful and, hopefully it inspires you to try to run your business in a way that's without blame. My name is Ryan Dossey. Thank you for hanging out with me. Be sure to like and subscribe. Talk to you guys next time.